Memphis, August 1974. Sarah sat on Beale Street for 4 hours in 98 degrees heat, trying to sell her dead father's piano for $200 to save her family from eviction. Then a man in a black leather jacket stopped, sat down, and played. What happened in the next 20 minutes was caught on camera and changed not just Sarah's life, but 12 million people who watched the footage. The girl selling her father's soul, Beale Street, was burning. Not literally, but the August sun had turned the Memphis sidewalk into a griddle, and Sarah Mitchell had been sitting there since 10 a.m. It was now 2 p.m. 4 hours, 98 degrees, no shade. Sarah was 17, wearing a faded yellow sundress that had been washed so many times the color had nearly disappeared. White canvas sneakers with holes in the toes, dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail, and beside her, carefully positioned on the sidewalk in front of Schwab's General Store, sat an old upright piano. A Kimball from 1952, wood finish dulled by time but still dignified, still beautiful in the way things are beautiful when they've been loved. In Sarah's lap was a piece of cardboard, hand-lettered in careful script, for sale, $200. Beale Street was alive as always, the birthplace of the blues. Music poured from every doorway. Neon signs advertised live shows. Record shops displayed albums in dusty windows. Street musicians competed for spare change from tourists. The air smelled like barbecue smoke, hot asphalt, and 100 years of music history. But Sarah wasn't there for the music or the history. She was there because she was 17 years old and her family was about to be homeless. And this piano, her father's piano, her grandmother's piano, the instrument on which she'd learned to play, the last physical piece of her father she had, was the only thing they owned worth selling. Sarah's father, James Mitchell, had died 7 months ago. Heart attack. He was 44 years old. One minute he was playing piano at Sunday service at Beale Street Baptist Church. The next minute, he was gone. James had been a session musician in his younger days, never famous, but skilled enough to play backup for Sun Records in the late 50s and early 60s. He'd played on tracks that never became hits, worked with artists whose names nobody remembered, but he'd been there in those legendary studios, breathing the same air as the men who'd created rock and roll. After the session work dried up, James became a piano teacher, $10 an hour, giving lessons to neighborhood kids. Barely enough to survive, but it was honest work, and James Mitchell was an honest man. Sarah's mother, Dorothy, was 45. She'd spent 20 years raising Sarah and her 2 younger brothers while working part-time at a fabric store. After James died, Dorothy took on full-time hours. But $900 a month wasn't enough for rent, 3 kids, utilities, and food. The life. Insurance policy. James thought he had turned out to be lapsed. He'd missed payments during a slow month 2 years earlier and never caught up. Nobody knew until it was too late. The eviction notice came last week. They had until September 1st, 2 weeks, to come up with $600 in back rent or they'd be on the street. Dorothy had been working double shifts. Sarah had been babysitting every night after school. Her younger brothers, Tommy and Marcus, had been collecting bottles for the 5-cent deposit. They'd scraped together $400. They needed $200 more. That's when Sarah suggested selling the piano. Dorothy had cried. "Your father's piano? Baby, no. That's all we have left of him." "Mama, we can't sleep in a piano," Sarah said quietly. "We can't eat memories." The piano had been James's most prized possession, not because it was expensive, it wasn't, but because it had been his mother's piano, passed down when she died. Every afternoon after school, James and Sarah would sit side by side on that bench, his hands guiding hers over the keys. Sarah's favorite song was "Can't Help Falling in Love." Her father would sing while she played, his voice not professional, but warm and full of love. The last time they'd played it together was 3 days before he died. Sarah remembered every detail, the afternoon light through the window, the way her father smiled when she hit the difficult chord progression correctly, the way he'd said, "You're going to be better than your old man ever was, sweetheart." Now Sarah sat on Beale Street with that piano and a cardboard sign, trying to sell the last piece of her father for $200. Hundreds of people had passed by. Some stopped to look. A few asked questions. "Does it work? Can you deliver it? Will you take $50? But nobody seriously considered buying a full-size upright piano from a teenage girl on a sidewalk. Some took photos, probably thinking it was performance art. One man laughed. "Good luck with that, honey." Sarah's eyes burned with unshed tears, but she wouldn't cry. Her father always said Mitchell women were strong. "We bend, but we don't break." Right now, Sarah felt like she was about to shatter. The man in the leather jacket. The man sits at the piano, but Sarah doesn't recognize him yet. At 2:17 p.m., Elvis Presley turned onto Beale Street. Elvis was alone, which was unusual. Normally he traveled with an entourage, security, friends, hangers-on. But sometimes even kings needed to escape. He'd driven himself from Graceland in his Stutz Blackhawk, wearing dark sunglasses and a black leather jacket despite the heat. He'd parked 3 blocks away just to walk, to remember. Elvis was 39 years old. His comeback from the '68 special had revitalized his career. He'd spent the last few years performing in Vegas to sold-out crowds. He'd made millions. He'd bought Cadillacs for strangers, paid off people's mortgages on a whim, handed out money to anyone who looked like they needed it. But lately, Elvis had been thinking about the past, about the Lauderdale Courts housing project where he'd grown up, about his mother Gladys and how they'd been so poor that sometimes all they had to eat was cornbread and beans, about the day he'd bought her that pink Cadillac and how her face had lit up like Christmas morning. Elvis walked slowly, looking at the buildings, remembering. Beale Street had changed, but it still felt like home. This was where he'd come as a teenager, sneaking into clubs to hear the blues musicians play, absorbing everything, learning the music that would become the foundation of everything he'd create. Then he saw her, the girl with the piano and the cardboard sign. Elvis stopped. At first it was just curiosity. You didn't see pianos on sidewalks every day, but as he looked closer, he saw something that made his heart ache. The girl's face. She wasn't begging. She wasn't performing. She was just sitting there with quiet desperation, hoping for a miracle. Elvis, who'd been that kid once, the poor kid hoping for a miracle, felt something shift inside him. He walked over. The conversation that changed everything. Sarah looked up and saw a man in dark sunglasses and a leather jacket. She didn't recognize him. She jumped to her feet, hope sparking in her chest. "Afternoon?" Elvis said in that familiar Memphis drawl, soft and polite. "That's a mighty fine piano you got there. You really selling it?" Sarah nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. It's a Kimball 1952. Perfect working condition. My father took really good care of it. Only $200. Elvis walked around the piano slowly, running his hand along the wood. Then he sat down on the bench, right there on the sidewalk, and lifted the keyboard cover. His fingers touched the keys gently, testing them. They were perfectly in tune. Someone had loved this piano. "You mind if I play something?" Elvis asked, looking up at Sarah. "Of course not, sir. Please." Elvis's fingers moved over the keys and he began to play. Not one of his songs, something older, bluesier, a melody that seemed to rise up from Beale Street itself. People started to slow down, drawn by the music. A small crowd began to form, but nobody recognized the man in the sunglasses yet. When Elvis finished, he turned to Sarah. "Your daddy teach you to play?" Sarah's voice caught. "Yes, sir. He was a piano teacher. He was really good." "Was?" Elvis asked gently. Sarah took a breath. "He died 7 months ago. Heart attack." Elvis was quiet for a moment. Then he asked, "So why are you selling his piano, sweetheart? This is a beautiful instrument. Your daddy clearly treasured it." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. "We need the money. My mom and me and my brothers. We're going to lose our apartment if we don't pay the rent. I've been trying everything. Babysitting, selling my things, but it's not enough. The piano is the only thing we have that's worth anything." Elvis felt his throat tighten. He was staring at his own past. Different girl, different decade, but the same story. Poor family, dead parent, kids trying to survive. He took off his sunglasses so Sarah could see his eyes. They were blue and kind, with crow's feet at the corners that came from a lifetime of smiling. "Let me tell you something, young lady," Elvis said quietly. "I grew up not far from here, Tupelo, Mississippi. We were so poor we didn't have a pot to piss in. My daddy worked every job he could find, and sometimes it still wasn't enough. When I was 13, we got evicted. Had to move to Memphis with nothing but what we could carry. I remember my mama crying, trying to hide it from me, but I heard her." Sarah listened, captivated. This stranger understood, really understood. "So I get it," Elvis continued. "I get what you're doing. You're trying to save your family. That takes guts. That takes heart. Your daddy would be proud of you." "Thank you, sir," Sarah whispered. Did you ever have to sell something you loved?" Elvis smiled sadly. "Didn't have nothing worth selling, honey, but I remember wanting to. Remember feeling helpless, and I remember thinking that if I ever made it, if I ever got out of that hole, I'd never forget what it felt like. The moment that stopped time." He pulls out his wallet. "What's inside?" shocked Sarah. Elvis stood up from the piano bench and pulled out his wallet. Sarah watched as he opened it and pulled out bills. Not ones or fives, hundreds. He counted out 10 of them, $1,000. Sarah's eyes went wide. She stepped back, shaking her head. "Sir, no, it's only 200. I can't." Elvis pressed the money into her hand, closing her fingers around it. "This ain't for the piano. This is for you and your mama and your brothers. For rent, for food, for whatever you need." "But I don't understand," Sarah said, her voice trembling. "You don't even know me." "Don't need to know you to see that you're trying to do right by your family," Elvis said. "And that's all that matters." "But then, you don't want the piano?" Sarah asked, confused. Elvis crouched down so he was at eye level with her. He put his hands on her shoulders gently. "Listen to me carefully, sweetheart. I want you to keep that piano, because that piano isn't just wood and strings. That's your daddy. That's every lesson he taught you, every song you played together, every moment you shared. One day, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next year, but one day you're going to sit down at that piano and you're going to play, and you're going to remember him, and you're going to feel like he's right there with you. Because music doesn't die, Sarah. People do, but music lives forever." Sarah couldn't hold it back anymore. She started crying, deep, shaking sobs that she'd been holding in for 7 months. Elvis pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and handed it to her. "Go ahead," he said softly. "Cry it out. You've earned it. You've been strong for everybody else. Be sad for a minute. It's okay." Someone in the crowd gasps, "That's Elvis." Everything changes. That's when someone in the growing crowd recognized him. A woman gasped, "Oh my God, that's Elvis. That's Elvis Presley." Suddenly, everything changed. Cameras weren't common in 1974, but a local news crew had been filming a segment about Beale Street. They turned their camera toward the commotion. People started running over, shouting, reaching out. Elvis stood up instinctively, moving to shield Sarah from the sudden rush. He raised his hands, smiling that famous smile. All right. Y'all calm down now," he said, his voice warm and commanding. "Just having a conversation with my friend here." But the crowd was growing. Voices called out, "Elvis, can I get an autograph? Elvis, what are you doing here? Elvis, I love you." Elvis turned back to Sarah one last time. He took her hand and squeezed it. "You keep that piano, you hear me?" he said. "And you play it every day, because your daddy's listening, and he wants to hear you play." Are you really Elvis Presley?" Sarah asked, still stunned. Elvis laughed. "Last time I checked, but that don't matter right now. What matters is you're going to be okay, you and your family. You're going to be just fine." Security had arrived, trying to manage the crowd. Elvis gave Sarah one last smile, patted her shoulder, and then he was gone, swallowed up by the crowd and the chaos, leaving Sarah standing there with $1,000 in her hand and her father's piano still beside her. The night at home. That evening, when Sarah got home to their small apartment, her mother was at the kitchen table with bills spread out in front of her, stress written all over her face. When Sarah walked in and put the money on the table, 10 crisp $100 bills, Dorothy Mitchell froze. "Sarah Rose Mitchell," she said slowly. "Where did this money come from?" Sarah told her everything. Beale Street, the piano, the man in the leather jacket, the things he'd said, and how he'd turned out to be Elvis Presley. Dorothy's face went through a dozen emotions. Shock, fear, disbelief, and finally tears. "Oh, baby," Dorothy said, pulling Sarah into her arms. "Your father would be so incredibly proud of you." That night, for the first time in 7 months, Sarah sat down at her father's piano. Her fingers found the keys, and she played. "Can't Help Falling in Love." It wasn't perfect. Her fingers were stiff, and she missed a few notes, but she played. And as she played, she could almost hear her father's voice singing along. The story that changed America. 3 days later, Sarah's story exploded. The news footage of Elvis with the girl and the piano aired locally, then got picked up nationally. Within a week, the video had been seen by 12 million people. The story touched something deep in America's heart. The king of rock and roll, the richest entertainer in the world, stopping to help a struggling teenager on the same street where he'd once dreamed his own dreams. A fundraising campaign started without Sarah's knowledge. The first day, $3,000 came in. By the end of the week, it was 25,000. People from all over the country sent money, sent letters, sent prayers. The Mitchell family was no longer facing eviction. The bills were paid, and there was enough left over for Sarah's brothers to go to the dentist for the first time in 3 years. But the story didn't end there. 2 weeks after their encounter, Sarah's mother received a phone call. The man on the other end identified himself as Elvis's attorney. Dorothy's heart stopped. She thought something was wrong, that maybe Elvis wanted the money back, but the lawyer explained. Elvis and his manager had set up an education fund in Sarah's name, $25,000. specifically designated for music education. Piano lessons, music theory, whatever she needed. Elvis hadn't told anyone about it, hadn't called the press. He'd just done it quietly, the way he did so many things. When Dorothy hung up the phone, she cried for an hour. Sarah held her mother and cried too, but this time they were tears of gratitude, tears of hope. Sarah's journey. That fall, Sarah started proper piano lessons with a teacher from the Memphis College of Music. She practiced every day, sometimes for hours, her father's piano carrying her voice through those old keys. Music became her refuge, her passion, her way of keeping her father alive. 6 months later, Sarah's high school held a talent show. She'd wanted to participate, but stage fright had almost kept her away. Her mother encouraged her. Your daddy would want you to play, and so would Elvis. Sarah walked onto that stage with her father's Kimball piano. The school had allowed her to bring it. She played Can't Help Falling in Love. Her voice was small at first, wavering with nerves, but it grew stronger with each note. When she finished, the auditorium erupted in applause that lasted 5 full minutes. Someone recorded the performance and posted it on local television. Somehow, the video found its way to Elvis. One morning, Sarah woke up to find that Elvis Presley had sent a message through his fan club newsletter. Saw young Sarah Mitchell perform last night. The girl's gonna change the world one day. I knew it the moment I met her. Keep playing, Sarah. Your daddy's watching, and he's so proud. And so am I. The legacy that lasted 50 years. Sarah Mitchell graduated high school with honors. She attended the Berklee College of Music in Boston on a full scholarship, partially funded by Elvis's education fund, partially by the donations from strangers who'd seen her story. She became a concert pianist. Not famous, not a household name, but respected, talented, dedicated. More importantly, she became a teacher. For 40 years, Sarah taught piano to underprivileged kids in Memphis, kids who couldn't afford lessons, kids whose parents were struggling the way her mother had struggled. She never charged a cent. Elvis gave me music, Sarah would say. I'm just passing it forward. In 2014, 40 years after that August day on Beale Street, Sarah was interviewed for a documentary about Elvis's charitable work. 50 years later, Sarah reveals what Elvis whispered that nobody heard. The interviewer asked, "Is there anything Elvis said to you that day that you've never told anyone?" Sarah smiled, tears in her eyes. "Yes. When he hugged me before he left, he whispered something in my ear. The cameras didn't catch it. The crowd didn't hear it. It was just for me." "What did he say?" Sarah took a breath. "He said, 'Your daddy's piano wasn't worth $200, sweetheart. It was worth everything, because it's the only thing that can bring him back. Music is the only time machine we have. Play it every day, and he'll never really be gone." Sarah paused, composing herself. "That's what I've done for 50 years. Every single day, I sit at that piano, and every single day, for just a few minutes, my father is alive again." The piano Sarah tried to sell on Beale Street in 1974 still sits in her living room. The same Kimball 1952. Wood finish still dulled by time, but still dignified, still beautiful. And every day, Sarah plays. Have you ever had to choose between something you loved and something you needed to survive? A possession with sentimental value that you had to let go? Share in the comments. Sometimes the hardest choices teach us what really matters. August 1974, a 17-year-old girl sat on Beale Street trying to sell her dead father's piano for $200. Elvis Presley could have walked by, could have ignored her, could have thought someone else will help, but he didn't. He stopped. He sat down. He played. He listened. And he didn't just give Sarah money. He gave her something more valuable. He gave her permission to keep her father's memory alive. Music is the only time machine we have. That's what Elvis understood. That's what he taught Sarah. That's the lesson we all need. We live in a world that tells us everything has a price, that survival means letting go, that practical matters more than sentimental, that you can't eat memories or sleep in a piano. But Elvis knew better. He knew that some things are worth more than their market value, that some possessions carry souls, that music, memory, and love are the only things that truly last. How many Sarahs are sitting on sidewalks right now? People forced to sell pieces of their hearts just to survive? People choosing between rent and memory, between food and legacy? And how many of us walk by thinking someone else will help, thinking it's not our problem, thinking we can't make a difference? Elvis made a difference in 20 minutes. $100 bills and some words about music and memory. That's all it took to change a life. And not just Sarah's life. 12 million people saw that footage. Thousands sent money. The Mitchell family was saved. Sarah became a teacher who gave music to thousands of children over 40 years. One act of kindness created a ripple effect that's still spreading 50 years later. That's the power we all have. Not Elvis's money, not his fame, but his willingness to stop, to see, to care, to act. Sarah tried to sell her father for $200 because she thought she had no choice. Elvis showed her she did. He showed her that some things are priceless and that the world still has people who understand that. After hearing this story, whose memory are you keeping alive? What possession do you have that carries someone's soul? And are you playing your piano every day, or have you let the music stop? Share in the comments. Our memories deserve to be alive. Subscribe to Elvis Presley Legacy Stories to discover more moments that prove the greatest gifts aren't things. They're the memories that keep our loved ones alive. Share this story with someone who's grieving, someone who lost someone they love. Remind them that music, memory, and love are the only time machines we have. And if you have something, a piano, a watch, a letter, a photograph that carries someone's memory, don't let it collect dust. Use it, play it, hold it, keep the memory alive, because that's what Elvis taught Sarah. That's what Sarah taught thousands of students. That's what we all need to remember. Music doesn't die. People do, but music lives forever. Play your piano, keep the memory alive. And when you do, the people we love are never really gone. They're just a song away.